wonderful. Thank you so much. So first of all, allow me to thank our Marion University Jazzy Knights. These students, as you can tell, are amazingly talented, and they are an example for why we do this work. So let's give them a hand one more time. And it is so good to see all of you here. We have just emerged, as you all are aware, from a remarkably contentious and long election season, one that has left the nation steeped in anxiety and tension. And I don't need to tell you all this, that after all, you felt the strain of this election as acutely as anyone else. And so college campuses have become essentially a battleground for political grievances and partisan debates, very few of which are related to the education of our students. Heading into this election, I think we all understood that the outcome could dramatically alter the landscape of post-secondary learning, the lives of historically underserved communities, and the nature of our democracy itself. But the election may finally be over, but the nation seems to still be as divided as ever. Our future has seldom felt so uncertain. And of course, it goes without saying that there's a change in leadership and administration. We also know that there have been proposals that could undo policies that have opened doors to opportunity for millions of students. We're hearing talk of dismantling the U.S. Department of Education and ideas that would reverse course on the progress we've spent decades building. But we cannot turn back the clock on the progress we've made toward making college access and completion a reality for every American. Instead of throwing it all away, let's get to work on fixing what needs to be fixed. We are here to say that at CCA and the alliance of our states, we will keep fighting. We will keep doing the difficult structural reform work to build a system of higher education that offers real pathways to success for every student, no matter where they come from. And we're ready to work with anyone, Republican, Democrat, independent, or otherwise, to protect and advance policy changes that drive student success and completion. But let's be clear, very clear, the values of the completion movement and this alliance are non-negotiable. We will not stop fighting for policies grounded in evidence, policies that we know deliver results. Because when it comes to building a brighter future for our students and our nation, we stand ready to continue this work no matter what obstacles emerge. While the political environment continues to shift like sand beneath our feet, Complete College America stands as a constant. And it's not just standing firm, it's actually growing. This year, we welcome 3 new partners: the State University System of New York, the state of Kansas, and the state of North Dakota into the CCA Alliance. The number of systems and states collaboratively working to enhance college completion now stands at 53. Let's give ourselves a hand for our expansion of the CCA Alliance. Our expanding alliance underscores a very powerful truth. Despite the discordant tenor that so often marks out our national discourse, there is far more that unites us than divides us. Leaders at the state, system, and institutional levels across the country, that's all of you. Thank you. I think we need a blessing right now. That's all of you. We share a bipartisan dedication to college completion. You are devoted to improving the lives of your state's residents and students and to addressing the workforce needs of our regions. This shared commitment transcends our political boundaries and is a testament to the universal but too often unrealized value of higher education as a catalyst for economic and social mobility. That's why there's one thing we were always sure of as our election day approached. The results would not change the core of our mission here at CCA. It wouldn't change what you all are striving to achieve and what we at Complete College America are committed to, and most importantly, what we are working to accomplish together. Our collective effort to ensure that higher education acts as a powerful engine of equity, prosperity, and hope, that persists no matter who sits in the Oval Office. There are 800 of you here today from every corner of the country prepared to reaffirm your commitment to this mission. We are gathered together not to react to the winds of political change, but to steer those winds in directions that benefit all students across our nation. The theme of this year's convening reflects that fearless spirit. We are undaunted, we are resolute, we are all in. The work of Complete College America and its alliance members over the last year shows that ethos in action. With generous funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's Intermediaries for Scale initiative, CCA has worked with 11 state agencies to implement research-based strategies designed to dramatically increase college completion on a statewide scale. We are building a network that will work together to conduct assessments of institutional performance, build data capacity, and develop and implement strategies to improve student outcomes. This effort, what we call the Complete College Accelerator, encompasses more than 80 institutions, a number we aim to increase to 100 institutions by 2027. Our project is one of 6 funded as a part of the Gates Initiative, and it is the only one, however, that touches on every type of institution: large institutions, small institutions, 4-year institutions, 2-year, private, historically Black colleges and universities, and Hispanic-serving institutions. This level of diversity and breadth is something that only Complete College America is uniquely positioned to achieve. This year also marked the development of the CCA Photo Library, a vault of authentic, unposed images that reflect this commitment to authentically representing the diversity of student experiences in higher education and reflect the real faces of its learners. Our library, which will launch early next year, aims to compile an extensive catalog of images that accurately depict real learning environments and genuine student experiences across a variety of contexts. Traditional stock photos often fall short, offering unconvincing, repetitive imagery that fails to depict the true diversity of student life, particularly for students from historically excluded backgrounds, those at community colleges, working students on commuter campuses, adult learners returning to school, students at rural colleges, and attendees of historically Black colleges and universities. Our new library will be freely available under a Creative Commons license, providing an invaluable tool for advancing the work of post-secondary success across all sectors of higher education. Over the last year, Complete College America championed the digital futures of historically Black colleges and universities as well, with the release of 2 critical reports. Critical Connections, Funding HBCU's Digital Learning Infrastructure is essential for meeting U.S. college completion goals, and the second report, Historically Black, Digitally Forward, Co-Designing Digital Learning Infrastructure for HBCUs. These reports provide an in-depth look at both the challenges and opportunities that HBCUs face in the digital age. Long recognized as vital engines of student success and economic mobility for historically excluded populations, it is crucial that these institutions are equipped to succeed in an increasingly digital world. The findings in our 2 reports spotlight the unique model of HBCUs in fostering student success, highlight the pressing need for enhanced funding for digital infrastructure, and offer strategies for developing technology solutions in collaboration with HBCU communities. By investing in the digital future of HBCUs, we are dedicated to sustaining their remarkable legacy of student achievement. Of course, our focus is not limited to the digital futures of any single type of institution. This year, generative AI has rapidly spread across campuses nationwide, catching even the most technologically adept institutions off guard. The swift evolution of this technology has sparked worries and concern about its potential for academic misconduct, among other issues. But it also holds immense promise as a tool for bolstering college completion. The potential for artificial intelligence in education is perhaps most significant at community colleges, minority-serving institutions, and open access universities, places where dedicated faculty and staff tirelessly serve a diverse and often underserved student population. However, exploring the possibilities of AI is not cheap, nor is it always easy, intuitive, or expedient. While some low-cost or even free tools can make a difference, the most significant impacts are likely to come from more advanced and more expensive applications of the technology. As a result, the institutions and students that could truly benefit from these innovations are often those least likely to have access to them. We are already witnessing the development of an inequitable culture of haves and have-nots, with clusters of wealthier institutions investing hundreds of millions of dollars in AI innovations while others languish and struggle to keep pace. Effective deployment of AI in education requires a collaborative approach that includes co-creation and co-design with institutions of all types. Without this inclusivity, community colleges and other open access institutions are simply unable to afford a seat at the table where decisions about the evolution of this technology are currently being made. This exclusion could prevent AI advancements from truly reflecting the needs of these institutions and their students, further marginalizing the learners who stand to gain the most from AI. As we move forward, it is crucial to shift the conversation from concerns about academic integrity to broader discussions about how we can utilize AI in equitable ways that enhance educational outcomes and boost completion for all students. This year, Complete College America has taken a significant step to reframe this discussion by launching the CCA Council on Equitable AI. Composed of representatives from historically excluded institutions and, by extension, historically excluded students, the Council urges policymakers, technologists, and funders to proactively, the emphasis is on the word proactively, disrupt systemic inequities in AI adoption. In the past year, CCA and council members have brought the conversation around equitable access to AI everywhere, from the stages of EDUCAUSE to the halls of Congress. We recognize that despite our strength and our growth, we cannot undertake this work alone. That's why we're also joining forces with policymakers, industry leaders, and leading organizations to broaden our influence and our reach in this regard. That includes organizations like 1 Million Degrees, an incredible Chicago-based nonprofit that is committed to propelling community college students toward economic prosperity through both financial and academic support. We are now assembling a national cohort of community colleges to adopt 1 Million Degrees as evidence-based student success program, providing learners across the country with impactful personal, coaching, and professional development. 1 Million Degrees has already guided thousands of students in the Chicago area to college completion and successful careers. I am thrilled by the prospects of so many additional learners now benefiting from this proven model. Today, we are so fortunate to have with us 1 Million Degrees' CEO, Anish Sohoni. I cannot wait to dive into the transformative work that we've got lined up together. All of the remarkable initiatives of the past year are built upon 15 years of dedicated effort. For a decade and a half, Complete College America and its alliance members have tirelessly pushed past barriers, always aware of both the potential and the frustrating limitations of our higher education and workforce systems. We've focused on scaling strategies proving to work, and on propelling actions that build systems that help every student earn a credential and connect to a meaningful career. As CCA celebrates its 15th year anniversary, we are thrilled to return to where this movement began, our birthplace of Indianapolis, Indiana. In many ways, we have watched this city evolve alongside our organization. Today, Indianapolis is recognized as a springboard for innovative higher education policy and a gathering place for thought leaders and funders committed to advancing post-secondary student success. I can think of no better place to celebrate not only the milestones we've achieved, but also the journey ahead. So let's remember that while our founder, Stan Jones, may not have foreseen every challenge of this fast-changing world, he knew that the values we would stand for would be timeless. The work of Complete College America and the strength of this alliance resonate as deeply now as it did then, because we know that outcomes matter more than optics, and that real opportunity outweighs empty promises. And we know that it is the diversity, the unity, and the shared purpose of this coalition that make us stronger than ever, more capable of rising to this moment, and more equipped to meet the call to action. I think that provides us with the perfect opportunity to now do one of my favorite traditions here at the annual convening, and that's our annual call out. So I encourage you to cheer, make some noise, jump out of your seat, stand on a table, whatever you want to do. If you are from one of these locations, and we might need to turn the lights up a little bit so we can see folks, but Make a lot of noise if you want to right now, if you are from a community college. How many of you are from a public university? Do we have any private institutions out there? Any tribal colleges? Yeah! Any Hispanic serving institutions? If you're from an HBCU, an HBCC, or a PBC, if you're a state agency or a policymaker, if you're an organization or just a partner to CCA, and let's hear from anybody who is from right here in Indiana. Yes. I always love that roll call because you can really see, or in this instance hear, the collective power and energy of the people here in this room. It's so representative of how we operate at CCA and amongst the Alliance. We stand here today not simply as an organization, but as a movement, driven by the belief that every student, regardless of background, zip code, or challenge, deserves a fair shot. Together, we're not just prepared to keep up with change, we're prepared to drive it. Let's forge ahead, ready to transform, to uplift, and to expand opportunity in ways that matter and in ways that last. So welcome to Indianapolis, and welcome to the 2024 Complete College America Annual Convening. Over the next 3 days, I hope you find the inspiration and the fuel you need to return to your campuses and continue doing the hard, necessary work of restoring the promise of higher education. To stay dedicated to our mission, to stay above the political fray, to remain energized even when times are difficult and uncertain and scary. Whether you've been with us since the beginning or you just joined the Alliance this past year, we can all work together to move the needle on college completion. Thank you.
Please watch the side screens for a message from United States Senator Todd Young of Indiana.
Hello, I'm Senator Todd Young. Though I couldn't be with you today as you gather in my home state, I applaud CCA's mission to focus on raising college completion rates across the United States. As I travel around the state of Indiana, it's abundantly clear that now more than ever, we need more Hoosiers striving towards post-secondary education. In part due to the generational investments in the CHIPS and Science Act, which I co-authored, the jobs of tomorrow are here today. But only one-third of Indiana's high school graduates earn a 2- or 4-year degree. And low completion rates aren't just a challenge in Indiana, it's a challenge across the country. Earning a degree or credential after high school is crucial for anyone wanting to participate in today's economy. That's why policymakers and all levels of government need to find innovative ways to help steer young people toward college completion. One of my contributions is the Fast Track to and Through College Act. This bill has no mandates. Instead, it creates a grant program to reward states who have policies to encourage early college completion. Fast-track pathways, dual credit programs, credit transfer agreements, these policies can help more students complete college at a lower cost, and we should invest in them. CAA is one of dozens of education and workforce organizations who have endorsed this bill, and I'm grateful for all of your support. This is just one of many ways we can work together to ensure America remains the land of opportunity. As you gather this week, I'm sure even more innovative ideas will be discussed. Know that my office is just a phone call away, and I'm always interested in new ways to unlock the doors of opportunity for the next generation. Thank you all. Enjoy your time in the great state of Indiana.
As we move to the panel portion of this opening session, I'm really proud to introduce some extraordinary thought leaders, and you can read their full bios in the app, but I will give a brief introduction of each. Let me first introduce Chris Lowery, Commissioner of the Indiana Commission on Higher Education, driving student success in the state that was the first member of the CCA Alliance. Please join me in welcoming Chris. Next, we have Dr. Nicola, Senior Fellow for Strategic Initiatives and Student Success at the City University of New York, also known as CUNY, and she also serves as a CCA Fellow. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Blake. Now let's welcome Darryl Cooper, a senior at Howard University, class of 2025, hailing from Atlanta, Georgia, and double majoring in political science and economics. Darryl is a policy and advocacy student fellow at CCA. Let's welcome Darryl. And finally, we are pleased to introduce Dr. Geary Schneider, the past president of the American Association of Colleges and Universities, and now senior advisor to the Civic Learning and Democracy Engagement Coalition. Please welcome Dr. Geary Schneider. So thank you all for joining us here today at this pivotal moment for higher education and the democracy. We're here today for a conversation about college completion and its crucial role in our democracy. As you all know, when CCA was founded 15 years ago, it was not difficult to get a bipartisan coalition of leaders together to talk about the value of higher education. And while CCA remains fully committed to our bipartisan approach and our work with states and policymakers, the culture wars and increased polarization following the most recent election cycle have really made higher education a divisive issue across party lines. So from the different perspectives you each represent, as an organizational leader, a campus leader, a statewide leader, and a student leader, how do you think we can restore public trust in the value of a college degree, regardless of our political affiliations? Commissioner, you would like to start?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for asking me to be here. I have to admit, while I was listening backstage, I was rather humbled to think that one of my predecessors, Stan Jones, was responsible for having started this incredible organization. So thank you. It's humbling to be here. Mm-hmm. And I also think, in the best spirit of Stan Jones, someone who enjoyed civil discourse, both words, civil discourse, and came to some remarkable solutions in his time at the State House and then, of course, at CCA. So more directly to your question, I think there are a number of areas in which, with higher education, we just need to think about how we can be more transparent and informative. Mm-hmm. And, I think of areas like what we have to offer, the costs, what does it cost? So many misperceptions about that, and we'll address those, I know, here in a few minutes. What the needs are in the marketplace, what the actual outcomes are. I'm sure there's not a person in this audience who missed the report from the Center on Education and Workforce from Georgetown University this past summer that said, first of all, there will be good jobs in 2031, the beginning of the next decade, for someone pursuing every pathway of education. Mm-hmm. However, it will only be about 15% estimated for those on a high school pathway, but about 66% for those on a bachelor's degree pathway and 19% in a middle skill pathway. That's the kind of information I think the public certainly needs to hear more about, needs to understand, our students need to understand. We talk also a lot about communicating with students, but there are a lot of other stakeholders with whom we've got to be talking on a regular basis. Here in Indiana, we formed something about a year and a half ago we call the Partnership Pentagon. You won't find it in statute, you won't find an official declaration of it, but it has been about 100 leaders from 5 sectors of our society getting together on a periodic basis to help us understand how we can solve the challenges that we face, declining college going rates, the ever intense need to improve completions. We want to keep all our graduates here. That's another one, graduate retention. But those folks from business, education, government, philanthropy, and nonprofit have come together on a regular basis to help us figure those things out. And I mention that because I think we'd be remiss if we forgot stakeholders who may not be present here, may not be in the room. And then lastly, I would leave you with this that I'll pick up on in a few moments. We conducted some research over the past year that was really enlightening, and you're going to be hearing more about it. Consumer research. Prospective students, especially younger students, their parents, adult students. And I'll leave with this headline. The headline is approximately 80% of those who were reached in this really robust study, almost 80% said that higher education is valuable. They value higher education. So there's a disconnect here on the way we're reaching individuals, and yet that all of us know is the truth here in this room.
So speaking of students, Mr. Cooper, I'm going to come to you because I just wonder from a student perspective, how do you think we can restore public trust in the value of a college degree, regardless of political affiliation?
So when I chose my, as a student fellow, when I chose my, so yeah, when my, okay, perfect. So as a student fellow, I chose my research topic on like kind of two topics here. The first side was the more philosophical, psychological aspect of like civic engagement and the importance of building critical thinkers out of college. And the other side was more economics. So I focused on labor economics and more so specifically underemployment. And there was a study on that side, there was a study done by Harvard Business School. It was talking about the middle school jobs. It was talking about how there's a high demand for middle school jobs. So that's like, associate's degrees, industry-specific certificates, and stuff like that. And this kind of hits home to me because I have family back at home who, they didn't think four-year college was an option. Probably it was too expensive. My brother didn't even finish. So this hits home for me because I feel like a lot of young black men, they are lost when it comes, sometimes they're lost when it comes to post-high school. Like we would have conversations. I knew from birth I was going to go to college, but when we had those conversations and I was like, oh, what are y'all doing after high school? They'll just be like, well, I don't know, probably going to go to work. So I think when it comes to expanding the rhetoric for higher education, we'll need to like emphasize, these are good options. And I think that starts in high school. They need to be able to leave high school knowing exactly, what the options are instead of leaving high school lost. And I think that will get rid of a lot of the slack that we're seeing. On the other side, when it comes to civic engagement, this is kind of important to me. I might talk about a little bit of philosophy here, but when I wrote I wrote an article on this earlier. I was talking about Friedrich Nietzsche's idea of politics and how it interacts with like this culture of scholarship, essentially. And what happens a lot of times is sometimes politics and like the controversy and the polarization and the emotions around it get in the way of like intellectual humility, intellectual thought, and that pursuit of truth, like with a capital T. And I've experienced that because I've been doing debate my entire life, so I love civic engagement. I love to debate. I invite disagreement, but I've been isolated in my classrooms because a lot of times I don't feel that it's both ways. They don't necessarily teach that, especially in the social sciences side of things. It's not necessarily inviting for disagreement or independent thought. So a lot of times I feel as though I'm lacking intellectual stimulation in some classes where I think it's necessary. So I think when it comes to stuff like that, we need more forums. I'll give an example. The Oxford Union, for example. Like I love stuff like that. I want to bring that to every university. So yeah.
Thank you so much. And so in light of that, as I think about, we're starting to hear this louder narrative, as you mentioned, about certificates and industry credentials, below the baccalaureate or the associate's degree. We're starting to hear that a lot of jobs don't really require a degree. And so going back to what you said, Mr. Cooper, and then you as well, Commissioner Lowery, there is this cacophony about that, but the data still unequivocally show that higher education still provides more options for socioeconomic mobility, that notwithstanding. So how do we effectively communicate the enduring value of a college degree to a generation that is increasingly exploring these non-college pathways? And I'll go to you, Dr. Blake, first to maybe address that question.
I think it's an and proposition. You know, so for CUNY, we're all in, and we're proud of that. We have 25 distinct colleges. We serve 225,000 students. So in terms of how we bring degree pathways to students, it has to be from multiple angles. I can give you an example of, for instance, you know, a farm tech program. If you do a program for 18 months, your average income starting is about $70,000. The average income of the CUNY students, about 50% of those CUNY students, is $30,000. So if your household income is $30,000 and you're able to do a CERT program for 18 months and you are making $70,000, that is an opportunity cost that we need to figure out how to talk more about. And for me, you know, I studied 12th century poetry. There is no career map for a 12th century, a person with 12th century poetry, but how do we leverage these entry points for students who want to take the farm tech, but then use other pathways to get a degree? So for me, it's, you know, it's not a dichotomy, it's an and. And the whole notion that we're serving different types of students, with different language, different political, you know, beliefs, different religious beliefs. How do we bring the narrative of, you know, graduation outcomes, transfer outcomes, retention, but also, you know, it's really down to kitchen table politics. We've just spent months on kitchen table politics. How do I buy milk? How do I buy eggs? How do I send my kid to college? And how are we as educators, you know, translating our information, and the fact that we, through a degree pathway, can provide a thriving system where we can break, you know, systemic isms. It's about generational change and social mobility. We've done a terrible job of telling that story. We talk about 4-year degrees, but then I'm in a room and we're looking at 6-year data. Why are we still looking at 6-year data instead of figuring out how to talk about 4-year completion or 3-year completion? We talk about 2-year degrees, but then the hallmark is a 3-year, you know, here's the 3-year data. So we're also complicit. We're all in, so we have to be honest. You know, yeah, we can talk about all the things that we need to change, but within our own systems, within our own policies, in our own campuses, how we treat students, we still have to do some work there. And we know what we need to do, and we just need to do it. And it's so urgent. We're going to slip and lose so much if we don't change some of the things that we need to change, even within a shared governance system. There has to be a little bit more urgency to fix some of those issues, because at the end of the day, people care about if they can buy groceries.
So with that being the case, Dr. Geary Schneider, you know, some have said that that message didn't break through. And still, right now, as we talk about the value, I just wonder, you know, what are the key outcomes that institutions then should focus on to ensure that higher education meets its promise as a pillar of democracy? So if we think about that as a pillar of democracy and a driver of economic mobility, why isn't that resonating that that's the case and that that's a driver?
Well, to pick up on the word complicit that has already been used, we have been complicit in failing to tell the complete story of what the benefits of a college education are. For 50 years, literally, we've been turning away from the public good mission of higher education and talking only about the career implications of it, which are important. I'm not saying they're not, but to talk only about that has been to miseducate an entire public to believe that the only thing that matters is jobs. And now they're just saying, well, just the skills, as though we didn't already know, and as though employers, and I know that you used to be one, Chris, employers in the for-profit sector have been telling us for years, do not send us people who only know how to do one thing. Our industry, whatever it is, including our own, is fueled by innovation. And so you need people who have the wherewithal to think out of the box, who see themselves as builders, who can work on teams, diverse teams with people whose backgrounds are different than their own. Civil discourse is part of that, but connected to the notion of building solutions. I'm now quoting Eboo Patel, who's president of Interfaith America. Teach our students to be builders and show that we are, and then show that part of what we're building is the economy, obviously, but also our democracy, yes, which is so profoundly in need of repair. And now I want to pick up on what you've just said, Darryl, both for its illuminative value, but also I think, let's think bigger. You're talking about bringing Oxford unions to every campus, and that is big, I will say that. But the fact of the matter is that every student in a transfer program or a 4-year program in higher education has to take 2 semesters of communication, writing skills, whatever you call it, 2 semesters. Very hard to find. It's true that that's not part of the certificate programs, which often have no writing at all, but it is the case that every student in the full programs is taking 2 semesters of writing. Let's make that a place where they're practicing civil discourse about issues that matter. You came to college, Darryl, with issues you were thinking about. You were thinking about what is the fate of young people from my community, black young men from my community. That is a real problem in our society. I believe we should be asking every one of our students in the first weeks of the first semester, what's a problem you really care about? And the answers will vary, and the views on what the solutions might be will vary. But by introducing students to the notion that the point of your education is to build the capacity to do something about problems that you know need repair, to my mind, we talk about outcomes. It's not just outcomes, it's a process. It's a pathway. And it's a pathway that needs redesign so that our students know that they are being prepared for the economy, which is fueled by innovation, but also for a democracy profoundly in need of the ability to work together across difference.
I appreciate that. And I wanted to also go back to Mr. Cooper for a second, because you mentioned it's been difficult in your classroom to sort of engage in conversations where the ideological perspectives are different. So I just wonder, how do you think, not just Howard University, but colleges writ large, can encourage civil discourse and greater empathy for those with whom you may have an ideological disagreement?
Yeah. So I touched on this in my article as well. There are a lot of philosophers who've kind of touched on this as well. It's not a new topic. It's happened a lot of times throughout history. But Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was an abolitionist in 1837 and one of the greatest thinkers of all time, in a speech called The American Scholar, he described what he called, it's like I'm quoting him, is man thinking, so I apologize for the gendered language, but it's a philosophical man thinking, and he was professing this to be taught instead of mere thinkers, or even worse, he said parrots of other men's thinking, which is, he called that, he wants us to kind of build our own individualistic perspective on all the issues that we're kind of seeing in the world, while also inviting disagreement and then kind of taking a step back and being like, what if I'm wrong about everything first, and then going from there? So I think even someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson was talking about this. I saw a little YouTube short on this. He was talking about how the difference between scientific disagreement and political disagreement. He was like, yeah, in scientific disagreement, we go have a coffee afterward, and we can talk about our difference in our statistics and whatnot, but we'll be perfectly fine. But in a political disagreement, y'all are going to be enemies afterward. It's so much hatred and emotion after your disagreement, when at the same time they're both sciences. They're not. There's nothing distinctly different. It just have different perspectives, maybe different interpretations of values, but there's nothing there that's different between the two. And I think that's kind of like the first step that we have to take and recognize that. And that starts with establishing intellectual humility in classrooms, and recognizing that just invite disagreement. If y'all disagree with me, I love it. I love stuff like that.
Well, I want to pull on that thread a little bit, because one of the things that we know, and the data bear this out, that most high schoolers graduate from homogenous schools that are homogenous environments. Their neighborhoods are homogenous environments. And so I want to invoke the conversation within civic learning and democracy engagement around experiences. And so experiential learning has a role to play in terms of, for students to be able to engage in the conversation that you're talking about, Mr. Cooper, they have to have different lenses and perspectives and experiences, being well-read, sometimes well-traveled, and being able to communicate across a variety of different backgrounds, et cetera. So how do we engage, and this is for anyone on the panel to talk about that, in terms of making sure that access to experiential learning is democratized, because that has tended to be reserved for the affluent and the wealthy students, and not those who don't necessarily have access?
Yeah, CUNY has done some work around that. We're really proud of it. You know, the chancellor calls himself, his focus is on, internships and experiential learning, but also paid internships. But also, I think Carol mentioned it a little bit, just how do you embed, participatory and problem-solving work in the first-year curriculum. That's something that we do. I mean, we founded Gutman Community College on this experiential idea that students from diverse backgrounds could have access to this knowledge and could have access to this information. A lot of first-gen students do not have a passport. There are passport initiatives, in CUNY, and I believe Howard also has a passport initiative. Full disclosure, my son goes to Howard. But there are pockets of innovation in the system right now, funded by Petrie and the Robin Hood Foundation to find ways to give students a paid internship or a paid apprenticeship that's credit-bearing, but also financially rewarding because, students who are underserved can't peel away from their lives and their jobs to then take part in these experiences. So we're at CUNY looking at ways to scale those experiences and working with the faculty to figure out how to give credit to some of that experience.
Could I lean in on that too? I'm going to guess that many of your institutions, or if you're here from a system, are already working on something called high impact practices. And those are practices that the evidence shows when students do them, they are more likely to persist in college, they're more likely to complete, and they are more likely to report higher levels of learning. And of the several high impact practices, from first-year seminars to learning communities to undergraduate research to diversity learning, global learning, internships, capstones, portfolios, the most powerful by far is service learning. It's the one that gives the biggest, but they all give a boost to academic skills and to students' gains in practical skills and ethical and civic engagement. All of them do. But for service learning, it's twice as high. And you can find this in a new report that CCA is part of a coalition advancing civic learning and democracy engagement. So I'm now referring not to the one that just came out yesterday or last week, but last month. It's called Every Student, Every Degree, College Civic Learning for Today's Students and Tomorrow's Democracy. It will show you this boost and the kinds of benefits to learning that students get. So my real point here is that we have been experimenting with what works better for today's students for a long time, and we have a lot of evidence on what works. And we're now in a position to think, how do we get these practices, including experiential learning, into pathways where students, as I said before, at the beginning they start working on problem solving and engagement across difference, but the whole point is that they at some point do something in the community that is working on a real world problem that they care about and that the community can benefit from. There's lots of pockets of this, but I think our next move should be to lean in together to say we are going to try to make this possible for all students. We know it's hard, we know money is going to be tight, but nonetheless, we cannot deprive the students who need it most of the practices that work best. And so the more we can come together in the kind of coalition that you've helped form through CCA, and working with SHIO and Campus Compact, AAC and U, College Promise, and there are now 14 states working together with this as well, 14 state systems, including CUNY. We're beginning to build an alliance that can commit itself to bridging our differences, healing the divides, and building the capacities that make the biggest difference to our students and to our society.
So speaking of high impact practices and also speaking of what works, we know that the CCA Game Changers work. And we also have subsumed those game changers now under 4 pillars of purpose, momentum, structure, and support. And so in the early years of the college completion movement, campuses and states really they leaned in on those game-changing strategies and that CCA was championing, and they saw progress. But the data tell us that there are still students on some campuses that lag behind. So I wonder, Dr. Blake, from your perspective, what do we need to focus on to move forward to close the gaps between our national attainment goals and where we currently are today on campuses?
I know Colin is here from CUNY. I don't know where CUNY is right now in the room, but he's our data person for the system office. I think Colin, I'm calling you out, but really working with the colleges to find better ways to talk about the gap, first of all. We assume, everyone knows there's a gap, but when you walk into a department meeting or a divisional meeting, there's still conversation around what does that gap really look like and how is it accessible in terms of how that data is reflected and put in the why and the student story behind it. But really trying to hone in, and this, I'm gonna steal this from this, what is the level of student care, or what is the level of care an institution promises to each student? So if you're in a cohort-based program, whether it's a discovery program or a SEEK program, I think Christine is also here, whether it's ASAP, you're afforded a level of care where your completion rate's going to be higher. Because you're in that cohort group, you might have access to transportation, more advising, more wellness support, et cetera, et cetera. But what about the vast majority of students who are not in a cohort base? What is your commitment as an institution to that student? Are you going to make sure that you have 3 prods to them? Are you going to make sure that you do have 1 financial aid conversation with that student? What is the level of care that you can promise to a student, and what does it look like, and how do you translate that so that every single person in your institution who has interaction with students know that there's a certain level of care afforded to those students? How are we leveraging, connecting our systems? So we just adopted Navigate. Cara Heffernan is in charge of Navigate at our system office. How do you connect all of the support services possible and have faculty and part-time faculty and staff members go into the system so that people have a holistic 360 view of that student, and they provide follow-up and care, and then someone's looking at the data to make sure that there are not gaps in the system. Like, how do you do that? I think that is something that we need to figure out. We all here have stories about someone who has changed our path that happened. So it happens that I was in a history professor who became a dean. It happened that he gave me a job in his office. It happened that then I was running the writing center. It happened that I was an honor student. It happened that they said, go to the McNair and go get a PhD. I didn't even know what that was when I was 17, 18 years old from Jamaica. It happened that, I met mentors who said, okay, you should be a provost or a college president, and then it just happened. It shouldn't be that we have you happen to have an experience at a college. We have to design the colleges to make sure that students have real pathways, regardless of who these students are, for success. And I know that we're all in, and that's why we're all here, but even me sitting here telling you, put every office in a Navigate system, and here's the protocols. With 25 institutions, I can't tell you, how heavy a lift it has been for me watching the folks who are doing that, and also getting the buy-in from everybody on a campus. It's not easy, and I'm not going to say it's easy and it's simple, but until we can provide a level of care to students in these experiences, we will never get to the outcomes that we're hoping for. So I think we need to pay attention to that. And for me, the story of the data and the compelling why and the student stories are the selling points in terms of what we need to do in terms of next steps.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you moving us from happenstance to intentionality. And with that being the case, I wanted to return to you, Commissioner Lowery. Indiana just announced enrollment increases for the 2nd year in a row. And I was wondering if you could share with our audience a bit on how you're intentionally, not by happenstance, building a culture in Indiana around the importance of higher education.
Yes, well, thank you. I am taking a lot of notes. I hope all of you are doing the same. This is really rich. Yeah, intentionality is at the center of it. A couple of years ago, we stepped back and said, we've got to think about the entire pipeline as we move toward attainment for our state. So off the top of my head, they're fairly easy. What's going on with the college going rate? There's not a person in this room who's not been concerned about that in the past several years. Right after a precipitous decline of a decade, I think several of us said, are we doing enough about that? And so I'll talk about that relative to enrollment. Keeping the pulse on the completion rate. By the way, the latest data tell us as of late last week that Indiana's now 10th, tied for 10th in completion rates in the nation. As our team, if there's anybody here from the commission knows what I'm going to say next, which is I'm pleased but not satisfied. Yeah, we've got to do better because, being number one is where we should all be striving to be for the sake of those students. And then lastly, in our state, and I'll just be very direct with those of you who are visiting us from out of state, we want to retain more of our graduates. Our state attracts a lot of students here. We're 8th best in the nation at doing that, but we're 40th best in the nation at keeping them. So we've got a lot of work to work on there. So you asked me about enrollment. Enrollment is up 2 years in a row, public and private, resident and non-resident students, and we're pleased about that. That was after a 12-year decline. A couple of things we've done that we're beginning to see a little bit of movement on. We started something a year ago in August called our Indiana Pre-Admission Strategy. Some of you have heard me say this before. I'll be very direct about it. We now have an R&D strategy at the Commission. That simply stands for rip off and duplicate. Yeah. So if you've got a great idea, watch out, we're coming after it. A few of us were talking behind stage. A couple of years ago, a number of us at the Commission were sitting around talking, and I was rather blunt about it. I said, I think the marketplace for a prospective student, for a consumer, for parents, et cetera, is pretty crummy. It's not as transparent as it could be. Someone's willing to spend tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. They don't necessarily know where all of the options are offered. They don't know how to necessarily navigate it. And even once they take time to say, I've got the money or figured out the resources, I've filled out your long application, then they have to stop and wait to hear. And so the state of Idaho gets credit from us, R&D, thank you, Idaho. I think following Idaho was Minnesota. And so we started something called the Pre-Admission Strategy. And folks, it's not overly complicated. SAT and GPA, junior year students, all students take it now in Indiana junior year. We match this up. We've asked the public and private institutions in Indiana, what's your cut? We're agnostic. Do you use one or both? SAT, GPA. And we started sending letters to students and their families, electronic and good old snail mail. And almost every senior now for 2 years in a row has been told where she or he would be provisionally accepted at 36 institutions in Indiana. This year, the average student learned that he would be accepted at 24 institutions in our state. My phone blew up in early September, both years. People who I don't know found my email and my cell number. It's out there. And so I started getting these texts and photos of letters. And the bottom line was a lot of students and their families had no idea that these institutions even existed in Indiana, let alone that they would be accepted. And then, of course, pointing them toward financial aid opportunities and so forth. That's been a factor. We've really leaned into FAFSA in spite of the challenges we know of nationally. I think we're tied right now from this previous year at just above the water level, first in the nation for completion rate year over year for low-income students. I don't want to ignore students writ large, but that was our gravest concern, was what would happen with low-income students. And then some that, we don't have the fruits of the labor yet, but we expanded our Promise program here in Indiana. Those of you who are not from Indiana, we call it the 21st Century Scholars Program. We determine at the 8th grade whether a student is eligible, essentially if they're eligible for free and reduced lunches. And what was just mind-boggling to me is that we spent 32 years trying to chase these kids down to sign them up and get them enrolled. And I guess a couple of years ago, a few of us asked the stupid question, if we know who they are, why wouldn't we just automatically enroll them? That's right. And so here's the bottom line to that. We won't see the results of that until the school year 2027 for the children young people we enrolled starting last summer. Before this went into effect in 2022, we enrolled just under 20,000 8th grade students as of June 30th, cutoff date, just under 20,000. In June of 23, we enrolled 46,000 students, and this June we enrolled just over 50,000. So, as I said, we won't see that yet. The reason I mention that is the things I just talked about are not fundamentally difficult to do. I think it's upping our game on the execution, the intentionality, one of my very favorite words, on what we're already doing. I've got a list of other things that we've been working on, but I've already taken too much time. Thank you.
No, thank you. And while we are out of time, I do want to say something as we wrap up. I'd like to first of all thank our panelists for joining us today and for the insights that they've shared on these issues that affect all of us as not only citizens, but as lifelong learners. And I would encourage you, if I could have had another hour with these panelists, I would say that if you see Carol Geary Schneider in the hallway, please talk to her about the Civic Learning and Democracy Engagement Coalition and what she touts as the ushering in of a new era of policy and public engagement that leverages higher education's distinctive role in nurturing the habits, skilled, and practical problem solving that's needed to help young people be successful in life and in careers. So please see her in the hall and talk to her about that. If you see Mr. Cooper in the hallways, please talk to him about the connection between civic engagement and student success. He knows a lot about that as a CCA policy fellow and as a graduating senior from Howard University. If you see Dr. Blake in the hallways, please talk to her about the 3-year pilot program that they've initiated at CUNY and how it's helping students to boost academic success. And of course, if you see Commissioner Lowery in the hallways, please talk to him about all things Indiana and all of the things he's doing to help campus leaders to do more with less funding and to reach the goals of the state. And so throughout the rest of the plenary sessions, you're going to hear from legislative leaders who have been advocates of increasing college completion and advocating for all the work that we're doing. We hope that you will enjoy the rest of your sessions, especially the breakouts. And in the CCA 101 session, before that CCA 101 session, please listen to this short video from Representative Robin Kelly of Illinois. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Robin Kelly, and I'm proud to represent the 2nd Congressional District of Illinois. I want to thank Complete College America for inviting me to speak to you today about the importance of supporting predominantly Black institutions. Educational disparities are prevalent in our nation, especially among Black students. The commitment of PBIs to foster the success of Black, first-generation, and low-income students while addressing some of their most pressing challenges has worked to improve these inequities. I am proud to participate in the annual convening this year to ensure government support for these beacons of higher education. We have a significant role to play in supporting PBIs. Students, especially Black students, that come from PBIs have proven to perform better than other community colleges. However, PBIs still struggle with challenges such as low graduation rates. We have to expand Pell Grants and make education more affordable for low-income students. When we uphold PBIs, we help Black students succeed. Together, we can make an impact on the lives of countless students and create a brighter future for our nation. Thank you.